growing up, I was never one to really like put myself in front of the whole class to show something. I was pretty reserved, I would say. And that kind of carried over into middle school and a little bit into high school as well.
That was filmmaker Joey Yee, aka Uncle Fuzz. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Welcome to episode 14 of season 4 of our show. Uncle Fuzz caught my eye last year sometime. Being stuck inside so much, it was inspiring and uplifting to see his photos and videos of the city he was born and raised in. It was obvious right away that Joey loves San Francisco, and immediately I wanted to know more about him. We met and recorded this podcast on a beautiful, warm May morning at Sutro Park. Here's Joey.
My name is Joey Yee.
Yes, it is.
I'm someone who was born and raised here in San Francisco. And you may know me from my video work that I've been doing over the past about year and a half. Just all about the city and kind of how I perceive it, how I understand it to be, and all the ways I want to share it with like the people that love it too. I guess I can start off on my grandparents' side. On my mom's side, so my grandfather was born and raised in Isleton, California, which is way off from the Bay Area. It's like about maybe close to 2 or 3 hours from San Francisco, all the way in the Delta where like Stockton and Sacramento are. Right. But he grew up there with a family that was about 9 people deep.
Wow.
And
meaning siblings?
He grew up with his mom and dad and his 7 sisters.
Okay. Oh, was he the only boy?
He was the only boy.
Wow.
Along with like a couple other people who lived. They all kind of shared the same house because, in the 20s there was like a lot of just you would keep a lot of family members in there along with like maybe some close friends as well. Mm-hmm. He was born in 1926 in Isleton, which at the time did have a very large Asian population. Okay. Which was like, I think after the gold rush, we're going even further back, but
that's fine. Yeah.
After the gold rush, a lot of Chinese immigrants ended up settling in a lot of different towns in California, not only in San Francisco, but Isleton. Then there was also another town called Fiddletown, which is like a little bit maybe like about 45 minutes further in. Okay. And that had like a majority Chinese population up until like the 1930s or so. Okay.
Which said was a town? Is it a ghost town?
I think there are about 40 people left in there. Okay. But I went there actually for my first wedding anniversary. We just decided to stay there. Awesome. Without knowing like the history behind it, but apparently the person that we stayed with also ran a museum which completely preserves a medicine shop from the 1890s. Oh, so and you can still go there. I'm pretty sure it's still open. But yeah, it's just one of the many things that like, I guess one of the many artifacts that are still around from that era. Yeah. Which is pretty amazing.
And is that a town that dates back to sort of post gold rush?
Yeah, I think it was incorporated maybe in 1870s. Okay. But yeah, anyway, back to Isleton.
Isleton, and your grandfather.
Yeah, he grew up there. His family was his family were farmers. Okay. So he grew up on a farm, helping his dad work until he was 18 when he joined the army. Okay. To go into World War II. Okay. And he fought for America.
Was your grandfather born in the U.S.?
He was.
Okay, but maybe his parents...
His parents immigrated here. I don't know what year.
That's fine.
But he was born in Isleton, 1924.
But now he's 18 and he's 18. Joining the U.S. Army.
Yeah. And all the stories I have of him telling me about his experience in World War II was flying planes across the Pacific.
He flew?
Apparently. Like, okay, I can't find any actual proof. Like, right. A pilot's license or a photo of him like in actual cockpit. Yeah. Most of the photos I have of him during his service were like, him in the uniform with his buddies, or him in the uniform awkwardly posing with a rifle. Yeah. Because all these 18-year-olds have never used a weapon before.
Right. Where did he go across the Pacific?
He said he went to China and Japan, or just like the East. It's like East Asia.
Okay. Was that his first time to go to China?
I think it might have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow,
Which is crazy to think about, yeah. But, war ended. He came back to America, came back to Isleton. And that's when he met my grandmother.
Okay.
I still need to get like the full story from her about how they eventually met, because she was born in San Francisco.
Oh, okay.
She grew up in the city and he was in Isleton. So I'm trying to think about how they could have met.
Well, we'll have her on the podcast.
I can ask her. She's still around, and
awesome.
Like I'd love to interview her at some point just about even more history. But the whole story of them meeting has to do with him gifting her several of the largest tomatoes she had ever seen from their farm.
Wow.
And that's like what kind of hit it off.
I love it. She's like, yes.
It's like, if he can grow this, like think about what we could do for like a family or something.
Wow. I love it. But she is born here.
I believe so, yes.
Did you spend a lot of time with them?
So we spent a lot of time like with our grandparents. We had 7 cousins the same generation as us. We were all within like the same age range almost. And so we all kind of learned how to grow up in a very American way. Because I guess I can go back to my grandparents moving to San Francisco. And he moved here in 1950 and bought the building that currently still stands over on Jackson Street. And that's kind of what set off this whole, I don't want to say empire, but like this whole like, he saw where he wanted to put his roots down and like build as strong of a family tree as possible. He ended up having three daughters. They all had 2 or 3 kids, so it's kind of like spread out since then. And we've all, as much as we can, have stayed in the Bay Area.
Yeah. Did he buy more than just that house? Did he buy multiple houses?
I don't know how many are still around within the family, but but he was somebody that I think everybody, his daughters, his grandchildren, all admired for wanting to provide for his family.
Fuck yeah. I love it.
Having the foresight to say that, okay, when I'm gone, I want to make sure that everybody in my lineage is set up and taken care of.
That's just a different generation.
I know.
And possibly, I feel like, intersected with like an immigrant sort of mentality.
Yeah, because
right?
obviously his parents, came over. He saw like the hard work that they had to do to run like the farm, and like I think there was like a dry clean business within that group, or my family members. And it wasn't just his kids and his grandchildren, but also his sisters, because like I said before, he had 7 siblings,
yes,
all girls, and he wanted to help them out as well, because he was the first one to move to San Francisco.
Okay.
And so when he did that, he allowed people to, like, he when he bought the building, basically, he didn't want it to ever be used as a rental.
Okay.
Like, he didn't buy it in order to make money. He bought it because he wanted his family to live there.
Right.
And so over the generations and over like the decades, multiple families and aunts and uncles have passed through that house.
Awesome.
Like I lived there from like 2 years old to 10 years old. Like my cousins have lived there. My great aunt still lives there.
Right. I was gonna ask, how many of those 7 great aunts came to San Francisco?
I believe they all did
at
some point. But nowadays they're like dispersed around the Bay Area.
Yeah.
But it's kind of crazy to see that, like when I go to family gatherings, to know that all 7 of them set up roots in the Bay Area, and they're all able to convene at some point at a banquet hall, like 45.
I was just gonna say
the
dinners. The dinners have to be insane.
The dinners. I still don't know everyone's name.
Right.
I don't think I ever will, because I feel like they're always changing.
Right.
Like someone I know as like, say like Janet or something is now like someone else for some reason.
Okay.
Like,
they're just trying to trip you up.
Yeah. It's just like, there's always like the family is always growing.
Yeah.
Like I've noticed that over the years.
Do they have a name? Like obviously people have different last names, but is there a name for like for those dinners, like the blank?
I would say the Woon family dinner.
Okay.
That's also actually another interesting thing. My grandfather's last name. And it's spelled according to his like birth certificate, and all the records that he has is spelled Woong.
Yeah, not
which,
Wong.
if you notice, it's a majority of Chinese people have the last name Wong.
Yes.
but I feel like he's the only person that I've known personally that has that last name. So
Okay.
the only way I can really explain that is that at some point during the immigration process for his dad, there was maybe a mistake made, or
Right, a typo,
or just like, oh,
righto.
put it like this so we get it. First, we're like separated from the pack, or to give them an advantage. Who knows?
Yeah.
All I know is that it's a very unusual name for a Chinese person.
Okay.
Maybe I think Korean has something similar, but I always like pointing that out to people and saying like, I don't know exactly like how this happened, but there you go. That's our family name.
Yeah, that's the name your mom grew up with. I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Okay. So this building, and it's still in the family now.
Yeah, it's currently still in the family.
Okay.
There are tenants in there, people who aren't the family right now.
Yeah. Was your mom born and raised in that building?
Yeah. So
okay.
Her and her 2 sisters lived on the top floor for about 30 years.
Oh wow.
Like bottom floor, like I said, was occupied by like cousins, aunts.
Yeah.
And it's stood there for a long time, and I really like that street that it's on. I think some people ask me sometimes, like, where do I find the most nostalgia in the city? And it's always been on that street, on that block. Because
and which street is it, and which block?
So it's on Jackson Street between Leavenworth and Jones.
Okay.
And that's a street that has a cable car running through it.
Right.
And it has a lot of 3-story buildings towering over it, and so the reverberation from the cable car line is kind of like this feeling. It gives me this, like, I think every time I go back there's like this very strong wave of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because I hear that sound and like just immediately think about being in my room, because I could hear it from like right outside my window.
It transports you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Time-wise.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So your mom was born and raised and grew up in that building.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk about your dad's?
Yeah,
side?
definitely.
Let's come out from that angle.
So his dad was actually so my dad's dad, my grandfather, was an immigrant. He came to America, I think it was around in the 30s, somewhere between the 30s and 40s. I should know this because I was just on Ancestry.com this past month trying to put everything together.
Yeah.
So I was looking through a lot of old documents that was like, he's right there.
Would you say pre-World War II? Like maybe just barely
pre-World War II.
Okay.
And
did he come alone?
He came alone and then brought his wife over, I think, a few years later.
Okay.
And they settled in Chinatown.
Okay.
And that's where my dad grew up. He grew up in the Pingyun projects.
Okay.
If you don't know them, they're like these gigantic, massive public housing units. I think there's about 3 of them.
Like if you don't know them, you probably know them.
You've probably seen them.
Right.
They're like pretty iconic if you're just like walking down on Stockton Street.
Okay.
You'll be able to turn a corner and this gigantic apartment buildings there.
I think I might know them.
Yeah, and so he grew up there with his brother, 2 brothers, 2 sisters.
Okay.
And
little more equity between the boys and girls.
And I would say that his upbringing was definitely a lot different from my mom's, because he grew up, not a lot of money.
Okay.
He grew up basically what were the projects for most Chinese people. So he was out doing things like selling illegal firecrackers with his buddies and kind of causing trouble.
Yeah, different, but also fun. Sounds fun.
Definitely fun, yeah. But in that same sense, he was a lot more ingrained to the social issues that kind of plagued Chinatown and a lot of like the poor housing in those areas during that time.
Do you know when your dad grew up or was born?
He was born in 1954.
Okay.
So he was around for I think there was a very well-known housing crisis or issue in Chinatown during the 70s. I don't know if he was old enough to. There was that, but then there was also like.
But that was just one example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I don't know if he was old enough at that time to be like an activist for anything. He might have been like 13 or so.
Right.
But he was always around people that just felt very strongly when it came to where like Asians should live, like especially in Chinatown.
Right.
but I guess I can kind of segue that into him meeting my mom.
Yeah.
In the 70s, and then eventually moving out to the Richmond District.
Okay.
So they met at an ice skating rink.
Okay.
I think the day that they met, my mom had to cancel a blind date of some sort.
Okay.
So she went alone, and they were both there at the same time, and they had to do the couples skate. So they had like girls on one side, boys on one side. I believe it was the girls' choice.
Mm-hmm. Like they get to
Although
pick, they get to pick their single?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's how they met for the first time.
Okay.
Eventually
so picked him out of a lineup.
Yeah, I believe so.
You'll do.
And afterwards, they ended up going on their first date, which my mom always likes to tell me that my dad showed up at their doorstep wearing like a bright yellow dress shirt and purple pants.
Yes.
Because obviously during the 70s, what else are you going to wear?
Oh my, was it polyester?
I
that
guarantee it, yeah.
Amazing.
Flared at the bottom, huge collar probably.
Highly flammable, but man, did he look awesome.
Yeah.
She must have dug it, right?
Apparently so, yeah.
Still tells the story. That's awesome.
But yeah, they dated for maybe like a good 8 years or so before getting married.
Okay.
They got married in 1983.
Okay.
In San Francisco, and they eventually.
Do you know where?
I don't remember the name of the church, but it was on Balboa and somewhere in the avenues.
Okay.
And then eventually they got their first house actually out in Daly City.
Okay.
When my sister was born in 1985, and then they moved back to the Jackson Street house with my grandparents when I was born.
Okay. Is your sister their firstborn?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we ended up living there for close to 10 years or so.
And that's why you lived there from 2.
Yeah.
Okay,
so,
got it.
So I was, I grew up basically, in the middle of what you would normally call the city, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Very urban, very dense.
Yeah.
Tall buildings everywhere. Cable car lines going up and down every single, every hour. But eventually they moved out to the Richmond District.
And that's when you were 10.
I was 12 at that point.
Okay.
Oh wait, I'm missing a whole section where they actually owned a house out in the Richmond District before moving to Jackson Street. Sorry.
Did they? That's okay. Did they rent it out? Or?
Yeah, they rented it out for those years, and then when they decided to move back, they renovated the home, made some additions, and then we all moved back.
Okay. Before we get you into that house in the Richmond, I want to hear more just what it was like. I mean, obviously cable cars were just part of your life.
Yeah.
Swenson's was just part of your life, but it's not part of everyone's life. What was it like, especially looking back now?
Even though I grew up there, I did not spend a whole lot of time exploring the space. I felt like my parents really enjoyed the city, but I think what they enjoyed more was going out of the city a lot. I always think back about like what we used to do on our weekends, and a lot of the time it would be going to Oakland or going to Pleasanton or going like very far away to these shopping malls to like just relax and like be able to have a lot of space. The kids can go wherever they want. Like mom and dad can go shopping for this, and then we can all get in the car and go back home.
Was it always places that were a little warmer than San Francisco?
Yeah, it was always warmer.
Yeah.
Like Vacaville.
Oh,
like we would be
Vacaville
there.
is America.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
Have to go back to those outlet malls or outlet stores soon.
Totally.
So I wish I could say I had like these really strong memories of like walking down, the hills and like riding the cable cars every day. But I didn't. And I kind of, it's not that I can't say I regret it because, I'm at the whim of like what my parents want to do most of the time.
Right.
But it's hard to say that, I have these like romantic memories of that area.
Got it.
So every time when I go back, I try to make sure like I take it in as much as possible.
Right. This is where I grew up.
Yeah.
And here I am. We were talking about Giants games. Do you remember your first Giants game?
I don't remember. I don't know if it was my first one, but it definitely is an early memory when I was 10. It was during the National League West clinching game against the Dodgers in 1997.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that the main thing I remember from that game was sitting all the way in the bleachers, because this is Candlestick, where it just extends into eternity.
Yes,
almost, it feels
right.
like.
Enormous stadium.
But seen from like high, maybe like section, I don't know, remember the names, but outfield all the way up near the nosebleed section, but I could see the final pitch and just the entire wave of people just moving at once, like, because it was packed. There were probably like 64,000 people in there.
Jeez. Was this back when when the fans could rush the field after games?
I don't think so.
So after that,
I feel like I've only seen that in New York or something.
Yeah, but they will stick around for those kinds of games. Like the game will end and then the crowd just doesn't move.
They just, especially when it's a clinching game
against the Dodgers.
The Dodgers, yeah,
totally.
Because I think the day before was the walk-off home run by Brian Johnson, and so this was the day that they could win it all. So that was like my biggest memory. I was there with my uncle, and we also almost won the like the prizes. I think it was a signed bat by JT Snow.
Oh shit!
Because it was the fan appreciation day that day, and it was like a section next to us, and we were like,
yeah,
almost
fuckers. So that might not have been your first game, but what I never got to go to Candlestick to see the Giants. What was it like?
It was cold most of the time.
Yeah.
Because it's a big, huge bowl, basically, that any wind that gets caught in there just stays in there for 9 innings.
It circulates. And,
which is why that when we would go, obviously it was during a time when they wouldn't fill it up every single day.
I would think not.
There was maybe like anywhere between 20 and 30,000 people max at any just normal game that's not a Dodger game. So what we did was I would go with my dad, get tickets for the upper deck infield, and then innings 7, 8, and 9 we would just walk down to the lower deck, because it was so empty at that point. Nobody really said anything.
Right.
So one of the biggest memories I have from one of those games was, I think it was the Giants Rangers game, where it went to 15 innings, and so like after the 9th we were like, let's just go down and just watch the rest of it, like really, really close. I think we were
6 innings down there,
maybe behind home plate.
Yes.
Or like a little bit off to the side.
I have some of those memories of different stadiums of doing that, and it kind of reminds me of like when you're a kid and you are able to easily sneak into the second movie after your movie lets out.
Definitely.
You're like, well, no one's watching.
Nobody's saying no.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna sit here and wait.
And the crazy value that you add to the price of that seat.
Because at the time, those like upper deck tickets were maybe like between $8 and $10
totally
max.
And behind home plate is like hundreds of dollars per seat. That's amazing. Okay, can we talk for a little bit about schools that you went to?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to, I guess we can start. I feel like anytime anyone ever asks you, where'd you go to school, it always defaults to high school.
Right. Let's go chronological.
Okay, yeah, sure. So I went to elementary school at Sherman, which is over in the Marina District. It looks a lot different from when I went, because now in the front yard there's just an entire garden that takes up maybe 90% of the asphalt that we used to play on.
That's a very good, like, that's what it was like then.
Yeah, it was.
And this is what schools are like now.
You don't know what you're missing. A giant concrete slab.
Right. To like slide your body across and hurt like hell.
It would actually also flood very, very seldom, or very often when it was like hard. Because I think El Nino was happening during the time I was there, maybe like 96, 97.
Yeah.
So we had huge lakes that would just form in the front.
Yeah. I'm just imagining a lot of really dirty kids.
Yeah, there were a few.
Were you one of them?
I was not. I was very quiet. Growing up, I was never one to really like put myself in front of the whole class to show something. I was pretty reserved, I would say. And that kind of carried over into middle school and a little bit into high school as well. Middle school, I went to Presidio over in the Richmond.
Okay.
And then high school, I went to George Washington.
Okay, just right up the
hill from
here.
Presidio. And when I was there, the one thing that the one class that I ended up taking was a video production class.
Okay.
And that was my first sort of introduction to just making videos and my interest in editing and making films.
So that must have been an elective, right?
So yeah, it was an elective.
Do you remember what it was about it that you're like, I want to take that?
I don't really know. I mean, I grew up loving video games, just anything sort of like visual on a screen. Like I love computer games, like console games, and I think part of me was like, I don't really like, doing sports really, or painting, or any sort of these physical electives. I was like, give me something electronic that I can fiddle around with.
Right. Did you like the storytelling aspect of video games?
Not at the time.
Okay, you didn't know it.
I think when it comes to video games, I'm somebody who has a very short attention span.
Okay.
So like it takes a lot for me to play one of those like really long like RPGs or something.
Right.
I'm someone who wants to get in, spend half an hour or so like doing something repetitive.
Right.
and then leaving.
Okay.
But when it comes to video production, like I think that sort of same mentality for games carried over to video.
Okay.
Because I found out that I really loved editing.
Okay.
Which is not something that people really say when they first get into like videos and movies. Like, I want to be an editor.
Yeah.
Like everyone says they want to like be a producer or a director.
But the world needs editors.
The world needs editors. The world needs sound guys too.
I'm with you, man, 100%. This was in high school, so this would have been like early 2000s?
This was 2000. I think I took the class in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah.
And within that class, is that where you figured out that you liked editing?
Yeah, it was. And so
did they have you dabble in other things like shooting and writing, storyboarding?
Yeah, so I think when at the beginning of the semester, every group of about 4 or 5 students, they're given projects, they're assigned projects that they can, that they're all sort of taking at the same time. So first couple months, everyone gets a project to do a silent film. Next one is everyone works on music video, or then everyone works on like a narrative. And I think for my group, it was a lot of people who, obviously are picking up a camera for the first time.
Right.
So it's like
amateurs.
Amateurs. I mean, I was an amateur at the time.
Sure.
But it was just like a lot of disparate elements.
Okay. That's a very diplomatic way to say it.
I think what I really appreciate about my instructor was that he kind of saw some sort of, spark inside of me. And so he helped me by like, I won't say he like separated me from a lot of the other students, but he kind of put me on projects by myself for a little bit to see like how I would, handle animation. Like I remember one time he allowed me to like make an animated movie like by myself.
Oh shit, fun.
And it was like a stop motion thing, and I'm like, this is how I like work. I think that was my first real big project as far as editing goes, and seeing how much I liked it kind of surprised me in a way, but it also made sense because growing up I was very into building.
Okay.
I love Legos, I love Connects, just any sort of thing that allowed me to construct things.
Yeah.
Like obviously with my hands is different from on the computer.
Right.
But
probably a similar, function of your brain.
Definitely, because obviously when you put a film together, you're piecing together like it's basically like a puzzle.
Right.
And that sort of thing just kind of clicked in my head. Like I just almost innately knew how to do it.
And did you like it?
I did.
Yeah.
It was kind of like meditative. And that's why I always tell people when it comes to editing, like you have to be the type of person who can really like kind of tune out the world and just focus on this one thing, this one story, or this one like beat that you can get, and it's super satisfying once you get it right.
That was Joey Yee. On the next episode of Storied San Francisco, Joey will tell us all about life after high school. Part 2 drops this Thursday. Music for the podcast was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Original photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 4th season, we have more than 150 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you can, subscribe, rate, and review our show so we can reach even more folks. And if you'd like to drop us an old-fashioned email, we'd love that. The address is storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, stay healthy, and we'll see you next time.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcast.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.